I felt a bit threatened coming into intensive agriculture at a time before the recession when everybody was going higher and higher welfare, that I'd spent £2 million on some sheds that were not ever going to be free range on top of a Peak District hill. So when Fancom came to me and said, we're developing with the EU PLF project this sort of system for monitoring the welfare of the birds automatically with cameras and computers, my initial reaction for doing that was purely based on protecting my business. I felt if I could show good, sensible welfare to the consumer and the retailer, that would give some protection to my business. What I didn't necessarily factor in was the benefits that we've learnt since then. So I didn't go into it for financial reasons, I went in it as an insurance. Now this is a graph of some data looking at activity. So what we're doing with this technology is we have cameras overhead of the birds, and the cameras pixelate where the birds are by picking up the white feathers against the brown manure background. And as the birds start to move around, it can tell you how much those pixels are changing and convert that into a percentage of activity. And then because we know where the cameras are looking, we have the potential to then start looking at how much activity around feeders, how much around drinkers, how much around rest areas, how much at the front of the shed, how much at the back of the shed, and you can start to extrapolate more. But this one here was just simply 2 sheds with chicks in. 1 shed with the green line, chicks absolutely flying. You know, for any stockman in the room, you go into a shed, I don't care whether they're cows, pigs, chickens, and you're a stockman, and you're used to those animals, you will just say to yourself, they're going to be a good batch. There's something that they just will. So the green ones were that batch. The blue ones, however, were just that batch that you go, they're kind of what they are. There's nothing wrong with them, they're not dying, but they're just never going to be brilliant. So what we were able to do was start playing with settings, thinking, well, let's change temperatures. Let's change air pressures and air speeds across their backs. Let's change lighting levels. Let's change temperature of the floor. Let's start playing around with some parameters. And you can see the blue line initially dipped the wrong way. And it was a case of, oh, whatever we just did in the last half an hour is wrong. Do it the other way. And what we were able to do was, over a space of a day or two, bring that shed back to normal levels of activity somewhere near the green shed. It never caught up on what it lost. It probably lost 3 grams by then, so that's going to cost me 30 grams at the end. 30 grams is a third of a day. That's gone. But what I was able to do was to get them back where the rest of them were for the rest of that batch, and not simply just let them go through and, oh, well, they lost me money, but forget about them. This one, I've just brought a couple of examples because of obviously time, but this one, I hope you can see, like me, these are effectively 5 days worth of activity of a shed, and kind of each day, which is a block of where the lines are, you can see a bit of a decrease in activity. Yeah, they're kind of very active in the early hours of the morning, and as the day goes on, their activity starts to tail off. And what started to worry me was, we designed these sheds with a number of drinker nipples and feeder pans based on how many birds are in that shed. But there's a very big difference between the levels of activity in that shed. So there's a potential there that at 2, 3 in the morning, they're kind of running around the shed looking for food and water, and perhaps haven't got enough feeding and drinking spaces, and then in the afternoon, they're not utilising the equipment that's there. So is there scope to actually try and manipulate the activity of that shed during the day? And so this is some trials data that we then did alongside with the vets, where we started playing with sleep patterns for the birds. And hopefully you can see, although unfortunately the graphs didn't come out on exactly the same scaling, but you know, that is far more flat line. There are peaks, there are troughs, but what we were able to do, certainly within a sort of 70% improvement, is flatline the activity in those sheds. And that's really, really important to either say, we need to look at lighting schedules that allow us to do that, or do we need to put more feeders and drinkers in the sheds so that we can cope with this changing in activity. You know, it's for us to decide when we're building these farms and managing the birds. What's slightly difficult is, as I'm sure in your sector, we have protocols we have to meet, which are often retailer-led, which are often instigated by very successful lobbying of NGOs, and that makes it very difficult for us to say, my birds want 3 periods of 2 hours sleep. They don't want a 4 and a 2. They don't want 2 4s. They want 3 lots of 2 hours to get a flat line of activity. But it could be construed that are we going too far and manipulating the bird against its natural rhythm of decreasing activity? But you know, until we have the data and we have the conversations, we can't decide either way. We're just at the hands of the lobbyists, and whatever they say, we do.